Alrighty. Initially, I was going to put this in my Season of Dawn recap, but it just sort of grew out of control, and I decided to make it its own thing. I've only been able to record this video recently. I know the news and feelings on weapon retirement have already hit, but oh well, I'm still making the video. I want to get to the bottom of this weapon retirement situation. I want to get to the bottom of weapons in Destiny. So let's talk. Speaking of retirement, my merch. The opportunity to get stuff from this first drop is retiring soon. Less than a week to go, and no, I'm not extending it. So go get it. Okay. Right now, weapons in Destiny are being thrown at us like sundials going out of business. If you wanted a god roll in the month of February, it was as easy as standing in the tower for about 10 or 15 minutes. It has never been easier to get good weapon rolls in the game, which inherently makes getting them, to me anyway, not very exciting at all to get as a reward. In fact, I think I've only been excited to get loot a handful of times since Forsaken, and that was mainly for the raid exotics, mostly because they were actually rare, even if they were purely based on RNG. We also have the problem of certain weapons being so good that nothing will ever be used in their place unless they are nerfed. The community hates nerfs, although that clearly does not stop Bungie from doing them, as warranted as they might be, and on more rare occasion, not be. I would say that power level is the main motivator in this game, and it basically always has been. It's been the #1 goal of most players on average. I want to hit the power cap, with guns being secondary, although the two can become one sometimes. In Luke Smith's post, he talks about wanting to refuel aspiration in Destiny, refuel the desire to want to achieve things in the game. Since loot is one of the main things people chase, having guns that don't fade away at all eventually will create a situation where new loot is not enticing because older weaponry is just as good, and in a lot of cases, like with rituals and pinnacles, even better, thus not inspiring people to play because they have no reason to play the game anymore. There is too much available, which makes new seasonal legendaries not that exciting. Plenty of people still play because the gameplay itself is fun. In fact, according to Steam charts, Destiny 2 has actually gained concurrent player averages over the course of February on PC, although not by much. However, I don't think it's outlandish to claim that lack of ambition is causing players to tune out, because I know that it's definitely taken its toll on me, alongside other issues that we're not going to talk about today. Thus, weapon retirement is born. If loot is the main motivator, then Bungie must provide more motivation for people to get it. When you keep adding and adding to the pool becomes diluted, and only the very best of the best make it through. After 3 years of power creeping and no reset, this means very few items will ever be considered high quality. This means a lot of the work Bungie spends on making guns can feel wasted because people are not opting to use them. In a given season, usually the ritual weapons are the only weapons worth considering, and maybe an outlier or two depending on what perk combinations Bungie decides to give certain guns. And again, after so many seasons of curated, high-quality loot with no reset, we can only go so high given the leveling systems that we use. I also want to clarify that Bungie has said that old weaponry will still work well in most activities, especially ones that you outlevel, like Heroic Strikes or PvP, which has no level requirement outside of Iron Banner and Trials. This change only seeks to shift weapon selection in endgame activities, where I imagine most hardcore PvE players will be spending their time. Guns are not being deleted from the game, they're not being made unequipable or anything like that, they will continue to exist. That being said, I know the #1 goal of most players playing Destiny is to get to max power level, and eventually there will be a time where your favorite loadout won't be able to get you to max level, which will upset people, despite max level mattering for only the smallest amount of activities, and despite most players not needing max level in the first place if they don't do those activities. So why don't people want to use these new guns? I've devised a list. #1. We can level up our old guns from the past infinitely, thus reducing the need for new items. After all, if the old is just as good as the new, why spend the time getting the new? Number 2, The best perks in PvE have not changed since the game launched. Variations of these perks have been made, but they all do the same thing: increase your damage or speed up your reloads. Number 3, top tier perks are available in every activity. You can get god roll loot from anything in the game, when typically in an RPG, the best loot would normally come from the most difficult content in that game. Raids don't drop guns that are stronger than other activities beyond dropping a couple of power levels higher, making raid weapons feel kinda pointless. Sure, Sacred Providence with Outlaw and Kill Clip is a good roll, but so is literally every other pulse rifle with that roll. The only incentives for raid loot are pinnacle drops to increase your power, and higher stat rolled items, which are already pretty rare. Garden of Salvation raid armor has a bonus mod slot that now will work with mods from Season 7, 8, and 9, making it a bit more enticing to use than previously, but more or less will be used for hive armaments from the menagerie for anything outside of the raid or nightmare hunts. Number 4, power creep is the only outside pressure. The only reason people choose to upgrade their arsenal is if a gun is 100% the better option, whether this is in the form of a perk showing up on a gun that didn't normally have it, or in the form of creating a new perk that is just straight up better than anything else available, thus not even giving you the illusion of choice. So what do other investment games or MMOs do? Well, they hard reset all of your loot. Whether it's a Diablo season reset, which happens after a few months, or a new World of Warcraft expansion every couple of years, the result is the same. Your old stuff will be replaced by new stuff because new stuff will simply have higher stats than your old stuff. In World of Warcraft's case, the game is tuned with these new stats in mind. Enemies have more health, deal more damage, so sticking with older items is just not a good idea. The ability to change the look of your armor to older pieces of armor while maintaining the stats, aka ornaments, as Destiny players know this concept, helped alleviate some of the pain of those cooler looking weapons or armor decaying away to the past. We have this in a limited way in Destiny, but only for armor. Unfortunately, Destiny's stat system doesn't really allow for Bungie to adopt a literal one-to-one conversion of what these other games do, because stats in Destiny don't affect you in the same way that they do in MMOs or other RPGs. The equivalent to strength or agility stats that would normally boost damage of certain classes in those games is power level in Destiny. All increasing strength, discipline, and intellect in Destiny would make us stronger without making the game harder until we sat at 100 stats in every category. Bungie would then need to balance the game around this fact, so anyone not at maximum stats would be at a disadvantage. This is one of the reasons why something like The Reckoning was built the way that it was. The only reliable way to kill people in Destiny at one point was to literally push us off of a map or to otherwise instantly kill us, like with certain attacks in the Heroic Menagerie. They had to balance the game around how strong we were. So, we need a way for people to get interested in loot again while staying within the confines that Bungie has set up. The number one rule would be to minimize power creep. Power creep is always going to be a part of a game's life cycle, but what matters most is minimizing it as much as possible, which is why games reset loot. It's the easiest way to get rid of power creep. The longer power creep goes unchecked, the worse the problem gets. However, as we all know, hard resetting all loot feels bad in Destiny because it feels like it invalidates any work that you previously put into the game. MMO players experience this as well, but MMOs have done hard resets for as long as I have played them. It's just something that people deal with, and deal with better than Destiny players do, and here's why I think that is. In Destiny, people build much more direct relationships with their gear, specifically weapons, because of the feel factor involved with a gun. MMO players don't really attach themselves to loot as much as Destiny players do, because in MMOs, most gear and weapons are just giant bundles of stats, and only the rarest of the rare items really build any sort of attachment. In an FPS, your stats are your guns, which are extensions of you and how you like to play. This is why it feels bad to leave a gun you like behind in Destiny or not have your favorite Call of Duty gun in another game, but not as bad when you leave behind a wizard staff in an RPG in order to upgrade to a higher statted wizard staff. I realize we're in painfully obvious territory for a lot of people right now, but I'm just really trying to flesh out all of this as clearly as possible. In short, a hard reset will reset power creep problems, but will invalidate previous efforts. So what are some other potential solutions to our aspiration problems? Well, Bungie could just come up with completely new things to go get that bring as much value as armor or weapons do. Does anything like that really exist in the game? I'm not sure. I don't really see that happening, as most of the coolest, best looking non-weapons or armor, besides emblems, all come from the Eververse, and I've spoken my piece about the Eververse already in that it will never change. Generating even more than they already make is potentially just not even feasible for them. Bungie has tried the cosmetic-only option, and it was met with pretty universal apathy in Prestige Leviathan. Bungie doesn't even make Prestige raids anymore. That's how bad it got, although that could be for other reasons. They could not provide adequate aspiration for people to go do Prestige Leviathan. However, those were very different times compared to today, and I think nowadays, people wouldn't mind having that, or having something like contest mode as an option again, although feel free to dispute me on that. For the most part, I think this solution is a bit out of reach for the moment. Well, what about solutions on armor and weapons themselves? Perks. There's something we can maybe work with. Well, hold your horses because it's look in the mirror time. The main counter-argument I've been seeing against weapon retirement is that with weapon retirement, we would just end up regrinding the same perks on guns we have now. So let's just cut the middleman and keep our guns, which makes 100% sense. And I have no doubt that weapon retirement will ultimately lead to this happening without other forces influencing it. I'm just of the mindset that I would rather regrind and get excited for quote-unquote new guns than just never be excited by new stuff ever again unless it power creeps forward past everything in the game, which is not really healthy design. Follow-up arguments I've seen are claims like Bungie just has to get more creative with their perks in order to entice people to use them, more interesting perks. Just make better perks, Bungie. It's so simple. It's so easy. Just better perks. Besides the fact that you, the community, yes, you, I'm calling you out, not you specifically, but just like in general, the general you. Besides the fact that you do not actually want interesting or creative perks, there are multiple issues with that. Number one, legendary weapons are not exotic weapons. Exotic weapons are usually the ones to get the unique perks and functions. Legendary weapons are more of your bread and butter go-to weapons. They have not ever really been unique outside of a couple of outliers like Martyr's Retribution with Season 9, and when raid weapons in Destiny 1 used to get their own unique perks, which I know people would definitely like to see again. Even then, raid perks were not super interesting compared to exotics. They simply buffed perks already in the game, in the case of Wrath the Machine. Legendary weapons getting perks that they did not used to have, to me, does not really qualify as interesting. A linear fusion getting firing line is not interesting to me. A ritual weapon getting all of the best perks in the game for itself is not interesting to me. A pinnacle weapon just having straight up better versions of perks that exist in the game. They're good, but not interesting. Legendary weapons have historically never really been interesting, and anything that has been interesting has not really been that good, again, generally speaking. You might argue that the Vault of Glass days had interesting guns compared to what we had seen thus far, and I would agree, but things have changed. Number two, at its core, perks are the main pain point in why weapons are not interesting as a whole. The perk meta has not changed in years in PvE. Damage perks are better than non-damage perks 99% of the time in PvE. A reload perk and a damage perk is the most optimized you can get, and that is it. There isn't really that much freedom of choice. If you want to be playing at the top of your game, you get those perks, and that's it. Now, things might be a little more interesting if those perks were actually rare, like if damage perks only could come on guns that came from difficult activities. Unfortunately, we've seen powerful weapons come from the raid in the past, and all it really did was cause players who couldn't raid to lament the fact that they will never get weapons as powerful as the weapons in the raid because they don't raid. This is the reason I believe raid loot right now is pretty bad and why loot rains from the sky. Raid loot is not special compared to other loot in the game at all. It's not really that much more powerful. It just gets you a few more levels a little bit quicker than other people. That is just not as much of an incentive. Bungie has gotten creative with weapon perks as recently as Season 9. Osmosis, Elemental Capacitor, and Lead from Gold are all pretty creative and have interesting utility and function. Even perks like Shield Disorient are interesting. We just don't care about them because they don't increase our damage when we do something, or they don't reward our play enough compared to damage perks. Vorpal Weapon, on the other hand, not that interesting. Increased damage against specific targets, but it's sure gotten a lot more attention than the others because it increases damage against a thing. Demolitionist is another recent addition, even though we had it in Destiny 1, that I would say is actually worth grabbing despite not being a damage or reload perk, one of the very few. Explosive Rounds and Firefly, but I guess Dragonfly with a mod as well in D2, are some other examples of perks that also do something to generate damage. Making different but equal perks compared to damage perks is also, I imagine, a lot tougher than people think. So let's cut the crap! People don't want interesting or creative perks. People want good perks. People want perks that they can directly feel the effects of. In moment-to-moment gameplay, it can be tough to feel the effects of non-damage perks, especially in PvE. You can feel Outlaw, you can feel Kill Clip, you can feel those perks working because you can literally see them working on your screen. Kill Clip is on because my damage went up. Outlaw is on because my reload was fast. Ambitious Assassin is procced because I have more bullets. But even on perks that you can feel or see working, Grave Robber, Slide Shot, Pulse Monitor, these are all interesting perks, but they're not worth taking over damage perks because damage perks are king. They always have, they always will be. Taking them out of the game would hopefully increase perk diversity across the board because people could then maybe take perks that felt more suited to their playstyle, or Bungie could make different perks that vary based on gun archetype. That's pretty wishful thinking though. Here's the problem! Taking damage perks out of the game, I think, would not be a great idea, even if it was a potentially necessary one. Why? Because they're good perks and people like them. They make us feel good. They make us feel strong, and players like to feel strong. Demolitionist isn't a damage perk, but it's a perk that when procced gets us that much closer to more damage. So I feel like when people ask for more interesting or more creative perks, what they're really asking for is more damage perks, or more perks that revolve around generating more damage. And Bungie has supplied them. Swashbuckler, Multi-Kill Clip, Vorpal Weapon, to name a few. And then ultimately, they gave us Master of Arms, the best damage perk of all. And what happened? Everyone used Master of Arms, and even with its nerf, it's still one of the best perks in the game, and Recluse is still one of the best guns in the game, just not overwhelmingly so. And without weapon or perk retirement, it would remain until it got nerfed. And even if the answer is to nerf those strong items, you still ultimately end up with the invalidation of effort, since apparently 50% of the community gets things that are about to be nerfed literal minutes before they're about to be nerfed. What the hell, Bungie? Took me 87 years to get Recluse, and now you're nerfing it. This game sucks. You suck. Big fan. They'll love the game. Still gonna play it. Now, I think if people really did want to see creative or interesting perks that maybe also happen to be good, we need to let Bungie take the seasonal artifact route with weapons as well. Seasonal artifacts and their mods are only around for 3 months. This lets Bungie play around with interesting ideas or concepts, or maybe just powerful ideas or concepts that don't break the game for the rest of the game's life. They come in, stick around for 3 months, and then they leave or are rebalanced. If perks were able to do this, then this allows for experimentation to happen. Maybe we see those raid perks get some love again. Maybe we see more interesting concepts. Right now, Bungie must constantly fight against 3 years of buildup, making sure that what they do end up making doesn't break the game. They need to walk such a fine line right now. That doesn't really allow for as much creativity as one might think. New things get introduced and they're either garbage or the best ever with barely any wiggle room. Look at Season 10. None of the weapons in Season 10 can roll with a damage perk and a reload perk at the same time, which might immediately say to most people, sucks, boring, who cares? But Bungie likely did this with the seasonal mod system in mind. The Warmind, Cell, and Seraph weapon interactions are very powerful. The first time I actually feel compelled to test and use seasonal mods that aren't armament mods. If they end up being too powerful, then when weapon retirement rolls around, the guns simply cycle out. This, in turn, allows Bungie to make new, more interesting, powerful perks without them breaking the game forever. This also means that people are interested in moving on from their old guns so that they can play with the new gameplay elements that also feel strong. Another issue is force, in that people do not want to be forced to use something else because their favorite weapon is getting retired. I'll reiterate, retirement does not mean it vanishes. Retirement means you can't level it up anymore, but you'll still be able to use it in regular PvP and most non-endgame PvE activities for quite a long time, assuming things stay paced the same as they have with regards to power level scaling. I totally understand that argument. You don't want to be forced to use things when you already have things you like. You would rather choose when to move on. I just think that the only way people move on is when they are given something that is completely 100% better than what they have. Otherwise, people will not budge because why would they? But the only way to give you what you would want is for Bungie to break the rules that they've set up for themselves, unless they do something like what they just did in Season 10, creating interesting and powerful options, potentially knowing that weapon retirement is on the way. The issue of force also appears to revolve around the fact that people have to grind for hours and hours to get the thing that they actually want, and they don't want that work invalidated. I'm going to hit you with a hot take here. A hot take in a hot take video, Datto. You're out of control, and honestly, I love it. Hit me. You don't really need to grind for hours and hours to get well-rolled items, but people are so hyper-specific about what perks they want that anything less than the absolute perfect item is trash with nothing in between, and perhaps people should ease up on that as your main two perks are doing the majority of the work, especially in PvE. I've seen another argument passed around, and that's with regards to building relationships and memories with weapons. Bungie has passed on this notion of play how you want and wanting players to build memories with guns from the game, something I think people have taken a little too literally. When I picture Bungie talking about this idea, I picture them talking about something like Gallarhorn. For me personally, it's Hawkmoon. Gallarhorn created some intense hype around itself that to this day has not been replicated. Not only that, but it created a legacy. Hawkmoon was the gun for me in year one of Destiny 1. I made that my year one memory. My year one memory. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say Bungie wants to create multiple eras of memories and timelines of weapons that were the best. They want people to look back on the game and remember different eras, when X gun was good in year 2 and then when Z gun was good in year 6. I don't think they want the legacy of the game's weapons to be, hey, remember when we all got Recluse and then literally never used anything else ever again because it was the best thing in the game for 7 years? Again, that's just my guess. I haven't really been able to create those memories in Destiny 2 as much, although that might be the nostalgia talking. Year 4 was really nothing special weapon-wise because of what they did to perks, maybe Midnight Coup, I guess. Year 5 was probably the year of Recluse and Raid Exotics, simply because of Recluse's strength and Raid Exotics' rarities. Point is, multiple eras of memories is what I imagine Bungie is going for, not just one era of memory. Another thing, God, Datto, when will you shut up? Another thing I don't really see happening without weapon retirement is any vendor refreshes. If the majority of people don't want to be forced to use new items, and the only way to get people to use new items is to create better ones, I don't think Bungie wastes their time with new vendor weapons. Only one, maybe two of them would ever be remotely considered as a good option purely through perk selection, so there's no point in making a bunch more vendor trash, and Bungie knows this. They aren't going to drop the next hotness on a vendor. They will only ever offer side grades at best, and that is not enough to motivate people into using the guns, so no guns. With weapon retirement, vendor weapons could go back to having slightly more meaning as you find your way towards the god roll that you're looking for. While I do believe that the lack of a vendor refresh is also due to the fact that Bungie's resources are much more limited this year compared to years prior, I also think they're introducing fewer and fewer weapons because fewer and fewer people are using them, and people do not want to switch guns unless there's a good reason to. And finally, what's the point in playing a loot game when the loot experience is not special? Bungie is too scared to ask people to try to go get cool or good items by doing difficult things as of late, because people have been wanting more items for less work. This dilutes the loot experience portion of the game. You don't get excited for loot because the game asks nothing of you to get it. In-game achievements are rendered hollow. Memories that you'd want to create of getting your favorite guns or powerful weaponry come and go like nothing ever happened, because nothing is expected of you to actually earn those weapons. Bungie also probably doesn't want to make these kinds of pursuits as well within the seasonal model because of the limited time that would be required to go get said items, so they have to make things easy so people don't get more FOMO'd out of their minds. As a result, it's boring to get loot. That is my complete breakdown of weapon retirement in my eyes. That's the deal. If you've watched and you're still not convinced, I understand. I fully expect people to still not like the concept of weapon retirement and eventually just come to an agree to disagree conclusion. Some people just don't want it. I do, maybe you don't, although it does seem like it is going to happen at some point. That's it. That's everything I got. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.